On October 22, 1964, the James Bond series made history when Goldfinger opened in US theaters, and demand was so great that they had to stay open 24 hours a day to accommodate ticket buyers. Leading into 1965, the world was caught up in non-stop Bond-mania, as it was dubbed by the press. It was really like the second British invasion of the 60s after those pesky Beatles. Throughout 1965, it played like gangbusters and also sparked a whole slew of imitators, with Jean-Paul Belmondo's Bond-like The Man from Rio playing to sold-out crowds in France, while on TV, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. presented a very Bond-like spy named Napoleon Solo, a name that was coined by James Bond creator Ian Fleming himself. By the end of the year, the first Bond parodies would start to arrive, with the most successful being TV's Get Smart, created by Mel Brooks and Buck Henry and starring Don Adams as the world's least intelligent secret agent, Maxwell Smart, aka Agent 86, which spoofed all the Bond gadgets with devices like the shoe phone and the cone of silence.
What?
Bond-mania would kick into even higher gears soon, but first Eon had to keep the momentum going by crafting a worthy follow-up to Goldfinger. The original print of Goldfinger promised that James Bond would return in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but it was not to be. Instead, Eon plunged headfirst into production on Thunderball, which quickly became one of the most financially successful movies of all time, but left the door open to many challengers to the throne, including, 18 years later, Sean Connery himself in a rogue 007 film called Never Say Never Again. Here's how it all went down.
Alright, action!
Long before Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman owned the rights to make a Bond film, Ian Fleming paired with producer Kevin McClory and Jack Whittingham on a proposed Bond screenplay. Rather than adapt any of the novels, they came up with an original idea, but when the project went nowhere, Fleming went ahead and turned their screenplay into the novel Thunderball without consulting his former partners. Naturally, they sued, and as the original rights holder, McClory ended up retaining the rights to the book's story and to some of its characters, one of whom, of course, was James Bond. Rather than risk their character being spun off into a rogue film, Broccoli and Saltzman signed a deal with McClory where he would get sole on-screen credit as a producer for Thunderball in return for his binding agreement not to produce another 007 film of his own for 10 years, as they assumed that within a decade the popularity of the character would have run its course. Yeah, not smart, guys. All of this will come up again on our Never Say Never Again episode, but until then, all was well in the Eon Bond universe. Given Goldfinger's success, the movie was given a massive $7 million budget, 7 times more than what Dr. No had cost. Additionally, they were able to upgrade the overall look of the franchise. No more European flat aspect ratios. Now Bond was presented in 2:35:1 scope, meaning they had to reshoot the gun barrel opening with Connery, who'd always been doubled by Bob Simmons. When Guy Hamilton, the director of Goldfinger, was approached, he claimed he was too exhausted from the ordeal of making Goldfinger.
I was very fond of Bond, but felt that I had nothing to contribute until I'd recharged batteries.
Understandable, as this was due to be released in theaters in time for Christmas of 1965, exactly 1 year after Goldfinger's release. Instead, Dr. No and From Russia with Love director Terrence Young was brought on board for this action-heavy installment, which would include a significant amount of underwater photography, including a massive underwater battle which was shot by Riku Browning, famous for having shot all the underwater footage in Creature from the Black Lagoon. The story called for the return of Spectre, which you'll remember, Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion, with the organization sending out their number 2, Emilio Largo, to hijack 2 nuclear missiles from the US Navy with the help of a perfect double of a doomed NATO pilot, whose sister, Domino, is Largo's lover. Bond would be sent to Nassau to get close to Domino, and of course, he discovers the whole plot, taking on Largo and the entire Spectre army with some NATO frogmen in the thrilling finale. Largo was to be played by Italian actor Adolfo Celi, who, like many other Bond actors, is dubbed here, although strangely in his case, because if you listen to samples of the original audio, his English isn't half bad. Perhaps he sounded too suave to play the evil Largo.
You seem to be unbeatable, Mr. Bond.
Celi would become an iconic 60s villain thanks to this part, and would show up in many Bond clones, including the unfortunate Operation Kid Brother starring Connery. No, not that Connery, rather his kid brother Neil, but more on that in our next installment. For the role of Domino, French beauty Claudine Auger won the role over Raquel Welch and Dr. Zhivago's Julie Christie, although like many others, she was dubbed. Luciana Paluzzi would star as the first really bad Bond girl, Fiona Volpe, delivering an iconic performance that made her a sensation. The production schedule for this film was intense. Unthinkably, United Artists actually wanted the film for September of 1965, but editor Peter Hunt was able to convince the producers for another 3 months. Not helping matters was the intense press coverage. James Bond had become an icon, and so had Sean Connery, who suddenly found himself to be the biggest star on the planet. Not one who appreciated press intrusions, he only actually granted one interview, which was for Playboy magazine, where he said some pretty controversial things, but more on that in another episode. Now, this is where Connery began to actually really grow disenchanted with the role, and the way the public seemingly forgot he was an actor rather than specifically James Bond. He also wasn't thrilled when an underwater scene involving sharks used the real thing, leading to a very realistic double take.
And believe me, the shot we have in the picture, Sean Connery is not acting.
We were watching horrified from the top and told Sean to get out as quickly as possible.
And I got out of the water without, I think I was dry when I touched the side.
And I've never seen somebody leave a pool at the speed that Sean did.
I don't know whose fault it was, but it didn't happen again.
So let's break it down. Thunderball is probably the most ambitious Bond screenplay of its era, but it's also, perhaps, the product of too many cooks, with it seeming like credited screenwriters Richard Maybaum and John Hopkins were trying to throw in everything but the kitchen sink. Truly, this would become standard. It's the first screenplay that feels like it may have been written by committee.
Highly irregular.
But for what it is, it's an effective skeleton to hang a large budget action movie off of, although a big mistake was made by setting so much of the action underwater. I give it a 6 on 10. The villains, however, are really strong. Emilio Largo is another shadow Bond, being a sophisticated European gentleman with a cool eye patch and a sense of style. Yet, as cool as he is, as far as baddies go, Paluzzi walks away with the film as Fiona Volpe, who beds Bond but refuses to be won over to the side of good, as was Pussy Galore. Plus, we get another look at the shadowy, menacing number 1, who, as we all know, is Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Give the villains a 9 on 10.
The spectre of defeat. That your luck was due to change.
We'll soon find out.
As far as Bond girls go, the movie is loaded. Bond beds not 1, not 2, but 3 women in this film, and there's also Martin Beswick's Paula, who's a short-lived Bond ally. Auger's Domino is the main Bond girl, while Paluzzi steals a little bit of her thunder as the wicked Fiona. Molly Peters' Patricia Fearing also caused a big commotion, with her doing a brief, tastefully shot nude scene in a sauna, which was pretty hot stuff for 1965. The score by John Barry is killer, and if the movie suffers from too much underwater footage, the power of Barry's score saves the day. Notably, the film has a killer theme song by Tom Jones.
Like
Although it wasn't the original song. Originally, Dionne Warwick was supposed to sing a song called Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, named after Bond's nickname in Japan, but it wasn't used, perhaps because after Goldfinger they were worried about not having the theme song share the film's title. It's accompanied by one of title designer Maurice Binder's most beautiful opening sequences. I give the score a 10 on 10. As far as gadgets go, fresh off of Thunderball, Desmond Llewellyn's Q is sent out to arm Bond in the field, with him giving him a micro underwater breather that apparently was so convincing the American Army actually contacted the filmmakers about the patent. Then there's a watch/Geiger counter, and early on a jetpack that was actually the real deal, as it was designed by the Army by Bell Textron, but could only fly 20 minutes and was considered far too dangerous for the Army. It's rather clumsily used here. It's just lying around for Bond to use, with a helmet of course. Plus, we also get a brief reprise of the Aston Martin DB5, and the gadgets are all teed up, but they're not used. So in this one, gadgets get a 7.
Try to be a little less than your usual frivolous self, 007.
The kill count to this one is 16, double that of the last film, with some great one-liners too.
I think he got the point. One of my friends sits this one out. She's just dead.
My favorite action scene in this movie is the amazing hand-to-hand scrap Bond has with a baddie in drag in the opening teaser. It's brilliantly cut by Peter Hunt and immediately sets Bond up as a man that's not to be trifled with. Overall, I have a major soft spot for Thunderball. You see, it was my first ever James Bond film, one I saw at the tender age of 8 on the ABC Sunday Night Movie. I even remember the date, December 31st, 1989. What a way to end the 80s. And while I admit that the underwater stuff does indeed slow the film down, I still have a major soft spot for it, and I give it a strong 8 on 10. Of course, Thunderball was an even bigger worldwide hit than Goldfinger. It was the #1 movie at the box office for 1966, making $11 million more than the second highest grossing film on the list, the classic David Lean film Dr. Zhivago. Worldwide, it made an astounding $141 million. Crazy for the 60s. Adjusted for inflation, it made over $1 billion, meaning it's still the second highest grossing Bond film ever, behind Skyfall. Of course, a sequel was a given, but it would be beaten to the theaters by another movie featuring James Bond that counted not 1, not 2, not even 3 or 4, but 5 directors. Get the scoop next time, because James Bond will be back, in a way, in Casino Royale. And no, it's not that one.
Got it! Bloody good. No, I know, but it's all right. You all right, Sean? Bloody good. Bloody good.